Imagine a quiet office in the heart of Lincolnshire, late 2011. A finance officer for the NHS is reviewing the books for a project that represents more than just brick and mortar. They are building Discovery House, a specialized mental health rehabilitation unit designed to provide a sanctuary for adults in the midst of profound psychological crises. This is a facility meant for those who have reached their lowest point, people who require intensive, round-the-clock support to survive. The budget is set, 1.28 million of taxpayer money. The paperwork is finalized, and the electronic transfer is initiated. On the screen, the transaction reads complete. The money is gone, presumably into the account of the legitimate construction firm tasked with building this lifeline. But 3 months later, a phone call shatters the routine. The contractors are asking why they haven't been paid. The NHS points to their records, showing a successful transfer of over £1 million. The contractors point to their empty accounts. When the two parties finally sit down to compare the details, a chilling reality emerges. The invoice looked perfect. It featured the correct letterhead, the proper corporate logos, and professional formatting that mirrored every previous communication. However, a single subtle change had been made. The bank details, somewhere between the contractor's office and the NHS finance department, a shadow had intervened. The 1.28 million hadn't gone to build a hospital. It had been diverted into a labyrinth of criminal accounts, vanishing in mere seconds. This was no simple error. It was the first visible thread of a massive, sophisticated tapestry of deception. As the Lincolnshire police launched what would become known as Operation Tarlac, they realized the scope of the unfortunate event was staggering. This wasn't a lone hacker in a basement. This was a professional, international organization that viewed public services as an ATM. While the staff at the NHS scrambled to figure out how to keep their project on track, the stolen funds were already being layered through fake companies in Dubai, Turkey, and Poland. The money meant for mental health patients was being laundered through a soft play area in Scotland and a quiet cafe in the Midlands. The investigators were no longer just looking for a missing payment. They were hunting a ghost that had successfully compromised the very systems meant to protect the public's most vital resources. The mystery wasn't just where the money went, but how a group of individuals could so coldly target the infrastructure of human compassion. The investigation, codenamed Operation Tarlac, quickly transformed from a local inquiry into a sprawling international manhunt as detectives peeled back the layers of the Lincolnshire theft. What initially appeared to be an isolated incident of digital deception was soon revealed as just one node in a massive, interconnected network of systemic exploitation. As the Lincolnshire Police Economic Crime Unit began collaborating with national authorities, the true scale of the crisis came into focus. They discovered that the shadow organization hadn't just targeted one health trust. They had successfully compromised 20 different public bodies across the United Kingdom. From the government of Guernsey, which suffered a staggering £2.6 million loss in a single incident, to various housing associations and other NHS trusts, the total amount stolen reached an unfathomable £12.6 million. Every penny of this was taxpayer money, originally earmarked for infrastructure, social housing, and the support of vulnerable individuals. The method employed by the group was a chillingly efficient form of mandate fraud, a psychological and administrative strike that exploited the inherent trust within large organizations. The perpetrators did not simply hack into a bank account and withdraw funds. They conducted deep, meticulous research into the public bodies they intended to target. They identified major construction projects and significant service contracts, essentially waiting for the moment when a substantial payment was due. By intercepting communications potentially through sophisticated email compromises or even internal leaks, they gathered enough intelligence to create a perfect forgery. They would send a letter or an email that appeared to come directly from a legitimate contractor, complete with identical logos, professional signatures, and the correct internal reference numbers. The message was always simple and seemingly routine: our bank details have changed. Please update your records for all future payments. To the overworked finance teams receiving these notices, nothing seemed out of place. The documents passed every standard security check because they were designed to mirror the exact aesthetic and tone of official corporate correspondence. Once the records were updated, the next legitimate invoice was processed and sent directly into the hands of the criminal network. The brilliance of this act was its silence. The theft often went undetected for months, only surfacing when the actual contractors eventually inquired about their missing funds. By that point, the money was long gone. The gang utilized a complex laundering system that mirrored the sophistication of a legitimate global enterprise. Within hours of a successful transfer, the funds were splintered into smaller transactions and bounced through accounts in the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, and Poland. The trail was intentionally cluttered with legitimate-looking business fronts to confuse forensic accountants. While public services were left reeling from the sudden financial deficit, the architects of the scheme were watching their illicit gains circulate through a global web, always staying several steps ahead of the law. The investigators realized they weren't just fighting a group of thieves. They were facing a professional entity that had turned the bureaucratic process of the state against itself. By late 2012, the digital fog began to lift as investigators from Operation Tarlac moved from tracking transactions to identifying individuals. The trail led them away from the offshore accounts of Dubai and the laundering fronts of Poland, back to a modest residence in Abbey Wood, South London. It was here, in November 2012, that authorities finally laid hands on the individual they believed was the central nervous system of the entire operation, Bayo Lawrence Anoworin. A 41-year-old man originally from Nigeria, Anoworin was not just a participant. He was what the judiciary would later describe as the prime mover. He was the architect who had allegedly designed the blueprints for the 12.6 million disappearance. The evidence seized during his arrest was overwhelming. Detectives discovered a trove of digital breadcrumbs that linked him directly to the coordination of the various frauds. There were bank records proving he held significant control over the accounts used to funnel the stolen wealth, and digital trails that revealed how the gang intercepted the communications of the 20 different public bodies. Perhaps most damning was the testimony from other gang members who had already been detained. They pointed toward Anoworin as the mastermind who orchestrated the timing of the strikes. He was the one who knew exactly when an NHS trust was about to pay for a mental health facility, and when a council was ready to fund a housing project. The charges were as serious as the evidence: conspiracy to defraud and conspiracy to launder money on a national scale. However, it was at this moment of triumph for the police that the narrative took a baffling and controversial turn. Despite the gravity of the allegations and the sophisticated nature of the international criminal network he allegedly commanded, the legal system made a decision that remains difficult to fathom. They granted him bail. In the eyes of the law, bail is a tool intended to ensure a suspect returns to face justice while maintaining the presumption of innocence. But for a man with international connections, multiple aliases including names like John Bay and Roland Martinsand, access to millions of pounds in untraced funds, bail was less of a legal requirement and more of an open door. The decision to let the prime mover walk out of the station on a promise to return was a gamble that the system immediately lost. Anoworin didn't wait for a court date or a chance to clear his name. The moment the constraints were loosened, he vanished into the ether. By the time 2013 arrived and he failed to answer his bail, the realization set in: the mastermind behind the largest public sector fraud in British history was gone. He hadn't just escaped, he had essentially been allowed to leave. This wasn't a case of a daring prison break or a high-speed chase. It was a quiet exit through the front door, leaving the victims of his scheme, the mental health patients, and the taxpayers waiting for a justice that had just slipped through the fingers of the authorities. The architect had left the building, and the search for him was about to become one of the longest and most frustrating manhunts in modern investigative history. With the prime mover now a fugitive, the investigation entered a stagnant and deeply frustrating phase that would endure for over half a decade. Bayo Lawrence Anoworin didn't just disappear. He became a haunting symbol of a systemic failure that allowed a high-level suspect to evade responsibility with baffling ease. By 2016, his name and face were etched into the British public consciousness when the National Crime Agency placed him on their notorious list of the 10 most wanted fraudsters in the country. His image was broadcast into millions of living rooms across the nation on BBC's Crime Watch, accompanied by a list of his many alias, such as Wemo Adi and Adi Anoworin, and a chilling description of his role in the staggering 12.6 million theft. Rewards were offered, Interpol was notified, and international red notices were circulated to police forces worldwide. On paper, it was one of the most intensive manhunts in the history of British economic crime. However, The reality of Anoworin's life on the run was far less cinematic than the public might have imagined. He wasn't hiding in a remote mountain range, nor was he operating from a subterranean bunker in a lawless territory. Instead, he was living an unremarkable, almost banal life in the state of Maryland, United States. He wasn't using a complex web of counter-surveillance, or even a particularly impenetrable new identity. He was simply existing in a suburban American neighborhood, living in plain sight, while his face was being shared by law enforcement as one of the most wanted financial criminals on the planet. This jarring disconnect raised uncomfortable questions about the efficacy of international cooperation, and the speed at which digital alerts actually translate into physical arrests. For 6 long years, the individual responsible for depleting the resources of 20 public bodies lived with a freedom that was fundamentally denied to the victims of his scheme back in the United Kingdom. In the UK, the consequences of his actions were not merely financial, they were deeply human and devastatingly practical. At the Lincolnshire Partnership NHS Foundation Trust, the loss of £1.28 million wasn't just a frustrating number on a balance sheet. It represented a direct blow to the estate strategy designed to improve care for mental health patients. While the trust eventually secured alternative funding to complete Discovery House, the theft caused significant delays and forced the cancellation of other planned improvements to patient facilities. Sarah Connery, the trust's finance director, would later reflect on the gravity of the situation, noting that the fraud diverted essential funds away from progressing future advancements in care. This meant that while Anoworin was enjoying his liberty in Maryland, people in the midst of severe psychological breakdowns were waiting longer for the facilities they desperately needed. The missing years of the manhunt were also missing years of support for the vulnerable. The system's inability to track a known fugitive across the Atlantic felt like a secondary violation of the public trust, proving that an individual with enough stolen capital could seemingly outrun the reach of justice, provided they stayed quiet enough in a quiet suburb. The silence was finally broken in September 2018. While the years had passed and the headlines had faded for many, the Lincolnshire Police Economic Crime Unit had remained steadfast, refusing to let the trail go cold. A critical piece of intelligence, a tip regarding a specific location in Maryland, provided the breakthrough they needed. Working in close coordination with American law enforcement, the digital and physical net finally closed around Bayo Lawrence Anoworin. 6 years after he had walked out of a UK police station on bail, his life of suburban anonymity came to an abrupt end. This time, there would be no open doors. He was detained, processed, and swiftly extradited back to the United Kingdom, where he was remanded in custody to await a fate that had been delayed for far too long. By January 2019, the scene shifted to Lincoln Crown Court. All 14 members of the international syndicate had finally been accounted for, with Anoworin standing as the last and most significant piece of the puzzle. The courtroom heard the full, staggering weight of the case: $12.6 million diverted from the public purse, 20 organizations defrauded, and an international trail of laundered wealth. The prosecution detailed how the scheme had specifically preyed upon the systems designed to help those in the midst of severe psychological breakdowns. They painted a picture of a criminal enterprise that was as cold-blooded as it was sophisticated. Yet, when the moment finally arrived for the system to deliver its verdict, the result was a stark realization of the limitations of current legal frameworks. For masterminding one of the largest and most socially damaging frauds in recent history, and for evading justice for 6 years, Anoworin was sentenced to 9 years and 6 months in prison. To many observers, this sentence felt unfathomable. 9.5 years for orchestrating a $12.6 million theft from the most vulnerable members of society, a sentence that, with good behavior, could see him released in significantly less time. While the Proceeds of Crime Act eventually allowed authorities to claw back over $4 million in assets, including the full $1.28 million for the Lincolnshire NHS Trust, the true cost was never just about the money. The years of delay, the cancelled healthcare projects, and the strain on public infrastructure left scars that no financial recovery could fully heal. The case of Bayo Lawrence Anoworin serves as a sobering reminder of the ongoing battle between professional criminal networks and the bureaucratic systems they exploit. It reveals a world where the most sophisticated strikes aren't carried out with force, but with a well-formatted letter and an understanding of human trust. As the prison doors finally closed on the architect of this scheme, the public was left with a lingering question: Does the punishment truly reflect the magnitude of the harm caused to the collective heart of a community? The money may have been returned, but the time and the missed opportunities for care were gone forever.